from the News Channel 5 Network. This is the Takacs McGinnis Elder Care Law Hour.
Welcome to Takacs McGinnis Elder Care Law Hour, where we explore the many issues that arise due to aging, disability, and unexpected illness. I'm your co-host, Tim Takacs, and today we're talking about the major problem of opioids and opioid addictions.
And I'm Barbara McGinnis. We hear about the opioid crisis in the news all the time, and we wonder, how does that affect our seniors? Not just opioid addictions, but other addictions. And to hear with us this morning to start the conversation, we're going to talk with Special Agent Thomas Farmer. And you have a really long title: Special Agent in charge of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and Director of the Tennessee Dangerous Drug Task Force. Sounds very impressive. Welcome. Some people don't even realize that they've been prescribed an opioid. Can you just start by telling us what they are? What are some common drugs that we interact with?
Right. Some of the most common that most people will be familiar with would be a hydrocodone. And this also happens to be one of the most commonly abused or diverted. And the more of those that are prescribed or dispensed obviously increases the risk for potential for diversion. So you have hydrocodone, Percocets, OxyContin, oxycodone. The list could go on and on, all the way up to some semi-synthetic opioids. And probably the most severe of those, or the strongest of those, would be what we're seeing a lot of issues with is fentanyl.
Oh.
All right, and so as I understand, we were talking just before we came on, is the pathway for people to get on these is mostly they're prescribed them for pain management?
It wouldn't probably start with the pain management all the way up to that level, but it could be an injury. It could be the thing with opioids is that's why it affects and impacts so many individuals, because one, we have to know the history of that individual, or that person needs to know their family's history in terms of addiction.
Right.
But yes, it could have began with an injury. It could have been with a simple injury where an opioid is prescribed, or it could just be someone taking the advice. They have a headache, or they have something, or something's hurting, and they take the advice of a family member or a friend, or whom they think is a friend, and say, here, take this, it's okay, which is unfortunately a very common method for diversion.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and as a result of this, the United States is like #1 in the world in opioid use?
Unfortunately, we are #1 in the world by a long way. The most prescribed opioid, according to the International Narcotics Control Board of 2015 projections for 2017 projections, consumption projections, yes, hydrocodone with acetaminophen would be the #1 prescribed in the world, and the United States overshadows every other country in consumption in all hydrocodone. And then if you get to all opioid use, it's somewhere estimated between 50 and 80% of the world's production of opioids. The most commonly used, oxycodone, hydrocodone, oxymorphone, all the way down to methadone, we would consume between 50 and 80% of the world's productions.
Oh my gosh.
Oh wow. So the reason we're at the top of the list, which is maybe a bad list to be on, or at least is because of prescribing practices, it sounds like. Is that right?
Combination prescribing practices, obviously, we're learning a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's the makings of the perfect storm, which is, unfortunately, we have the pharmaceutical industry that has produced a wide variety of medications that have a lot of applications and a lot of use. Production capabilities are extremely high. Marketing, unfortunately, the TV, we get a lot of information from who we are, what we're prescribed, and so it's a perfect storm. Unfortunately, a lot of information, and then we do have bad prescribing. And honestly, the medical industry, the healthcare industry, probably didn't have all of the accurate information. And then thirdly, how the methods of which we obtain those. Price, availability, perception of risk, and public attitude are that is the makings for a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And when you've got healthcare paying for those prescriptions, and so you have a means to achieve those or obtain those without necessarily any high cost to you.
Right.
All of those combining make a perfect storm.
Right.
A storm.
So let's talk about Tennessee. So where does Tennessee rank in the United States and opioid use?
Unfortunately, if you look at the United States, and the United States is number 1 in the world by a long shot. Tennessee, at the last time I looked at the numbers, it looks like we're number 4 on prescribed opioids for the nation per capita. So I want to preface that by saying Tennessee's made a lot of progress. We really have in the last several years. Made a lot of progress. We're making progress. But one thing that we have to remind ourselves is, even though we're making a lot of progress and our problem seems so high, and it is, the ceiling was very high to begin with. So we have a much farther trip, a much longer road to go than maybe some of the other states. So the other is quite frankly, law enforcement's had to, it's been a learning curve for me too, teaming up with, this is not only a public safety issue, it's a public health issue.
Yeah.
And we have to be very cautious and careful not to move too fast. Legislation could, yes, we could curb the amounts that could be prescribed, or we could wave a magic wand and say, this is going to be the new levels. Unfortunately, we have a lot of folks that are way above those levels, and so we have to have the resources that are in place to treat those and offer treatment, offer prevention, and then offer enforcement and balance all of those in a comprehensive method.
So what would you say, what are the largest age groups that have been affected by this?
That's a moving target.
Okay.
Obviously, those that are most common are going to be the ones that are taking the chances for riskier behavior. And so, yes, our younger groups, up to the 18 to 26 and then up. But this again is another category where we're changing the trend. And so that is the areas where we have focused a lot of efforts, and I'm saying we, the state, health, mental health, and substance abuse law enforcement, trying to go after those, because that's also going to be the potential future. So we have to look at the youth to make sure that we stop this cycle of addiction and abuse, and then we have to look at those most affected age groups, which are going to be 14 all the way up to 34, and then we already have a highly addicted group, and we have to consider our elderly.
So are you seeing a lot of elderly now?
Absolutely. There's no question, and it may be just a misconception or a misinformation. They don't realize that they suffer from it. We do get those calls from the grandchildren or the children saying, you know, my mother, my father, or my grandfather, he's 78, 80 years old. He's taken all of his medication, and all of a sudden he thinks that we've done something, that we're being cruel to him, and we won't get him any more medication. Well, he may have a problem.
Yeah. Right. So, in particular, what are the things that we're doing in Tennessee, in particular, to combat this crisis?
I think implementing first a comprehensive approach at it, balancing health, safety, mental health, and looking at all of those elements. We have to look at prevention. We have to consider and remember prevention. We can treat. We have to look at treatment. I think from a law enforcement, my side of it, we hear all the time, well, you're not going to arrest your way out of it. Trust me, law enforcement knows that. We coined that phrase a long time ago. But I don't want to give the misconception. Let's not go too far with that. Law enforcement has to be and is an important element of this. You have to have the balance. You have to have a comprehensive. So you have to have characterized as the carrot and the stick in this for long-term solutions. Implementing guidelines to educate. I think the Department of Health and Legislature did a good job with implementing some guidelines, chronic pain guidelines. We continue those to educate prescribers, to inform them. The Controlled Substance Monitoring Database was a huge asset just to get the information back to those prescribers, and many of them just were not aware of the levels or how they compared to their peers.
Okay, I think, are we going to put your contact information up? We're going to put that up really quick. 423-752-1479. Special Agent Farmer, thanks for being here. And so stay with us. When we return, in addition to opioids, we will be discussing other drug and alcohol addictions that affect seniors. Don't go away.